It was just past midnight when the call came in. A 911 dispatcher in Phoenix picked up the line to a frantic neighbor reporting screams, then silence from the Carter residence. Within minutes, patrol cars rolled into the quiet suburban street, their flashing lights slicing through the desert night. When officers forced their way inside, they found a scene of horror. 34-year-old Emily Carter lay sprawled across the living room floor. Blunt force trauma, blood pooling on the beige carpet, the kind of violent end that spoke of rage, not accident. There were no signs of forced entry, no shattered windows, no broken locks, nothing stolen. The TV was untouched. Her jewelry was still on the dresser. Whoever had done this wasn't after possessions. They were after Emily. And naturally, suspicion turned to the person closest to her husband, Daniel Carter. But here's where the story veered into something almost cinematic. Daniel didn't just deny involvement. He had proof. On the very night Emily was killed, Daniel was caught on multiple security cameras nearly 40 miles away. Not grainy, blurred footage. Not some fleeting glimpse. This was crystal clear, high-definition video showing him laughing, drinking, watching a Suns game at Riverside Sports Bar with friends. The timestamp was precise. The angles were clear. His friends backed him up for investigators. It was a nightmare. They had the motive. They had the means. But they also had video evidence. The gold standard in modern investigations that seemed to exonerate him completely. It looked like an airtight alibi. But weeks later, the case would flip upside down. Because the footage, the very thing keeping Daniel safe, was revealed to be something terrifyingly modern. A deepfake. Daniel had created his own alibi digitally. And so the question became chillingly clear. When the truth itself could be fabricated, who do you believe? On the surface, Daniel and Emily Carter were living a life most people would envy. They had a 2-story stucco home on the edge of Phoenix, complete with manicured lawn and a backyard swimming pool. Daniel, 36, was a respected software engineer specializing in artificial intelligence and machine learning. His co-workers described him as brilliant, the kind of guy who could solve coding puzzles others found impossible. Emily, 34, was the heart of her hospital ward, a nurse who patients adored, who co-workers leaned on. Friends said she was the type to bake cookies for a sick neighbor or stay late at work to comfort a scared child. From the outside, the Carters looked like the American dream. Young, attractive, educated, financially stable. But as in so many true crime stories, the surface concealed the cracks. Emily's closest friends later revealed she had been struggling. She felt unheard at home. She told her sister, "Daniel lives in his own world. It's like I'm invisible unless he needs something from me." They had been married 8 years, but the relationship was strained. Emily wanted children. She dreamed of a family, of slowing down her nursing shifts to raise a baby. Daniel resisted. He wanted financial security, control, order, children. He argued would disrupt all of that. There were fights about money, too. Emily had discovered that Daniel was secretive with their accounts. He had hidden credit cards, transfers she didn't recognize. He always brushed it off as investments. But perhaps most disturbing of all, Emily confided to her sister that she didn't always feel safe. Daniel's temper, though rarely visible in public, was sharp and unpredictable behind closed doors. She had considered leaving him. In fact, she had quietly spoken to a divorce attorney just 3 weeks before her death. It was a detail investigators wouldn't uncover until later, but it painted a portrait of a marriage on the brink. So when Emily was found dead, the conclusion seemed obvious. Daniel snapped, except for that perfect alibi. The night of May 14th, 2021 was warm, the kind of dry desert evening where open windows let in just enough breeze to make the house feel alive. Emily had finished a 12-hour hospital shift. She picked up takeout from her favorite Thai place and drove home. Surveillance footage from a neighbor's Ring camera showed her pulling into the driveway at 9:47 p.m. She carried the food inside. That was the last confirmed sighting of her alive. Sometime between 10 and 11 p.m., neighbors heard what they thought was a loud bang. Some dismissed it as a drop pot or maybe fireworks. Others described it as a thud, followed by silence. At 11:15 p.m., Emily's next-door neighbor, worried after noticing her front door slightly ajar, stepped inside and found her body. The neighbor's 911 call was panicked, barely coherent. Police arrived to the locked house. Nothing appeared stolen. There was no forced entry. Emily had been bludgeoned with a blunt object, later determined to be a heavy glass vase shattered beside her body. The scene told detectives two things. This was personal, and the killer likely knew her well. Naturally, the husband became the focus, but when detectives questioned Daniel, he was calm. Too calm, some would later argue. He told them he'd been out all night with friends at Riverside Sports Bar, 38 miles away. He hadn't even returned home until after police had already arrived. And to their frustration, he had video proof. The bar's security cameras captured him from multiple angles, ordering drinks, laughing, even high-fiving another man during the basketball game. The time stamps lined up perfectly with Emily's estimated time of death. It seemed impossible for Daniel to have committed the crime, and yet everything about the crime scene pointed back to him. When detectives sat down with Daniel Carter the morning after Emily's murder, they expected denial. What they didn't expect was evidence. Daniel leaned back in the sterile interview room, his hands folded, voice steady. He explained that he'd been out the entire evening at Riverside Sports Bar, watching the Phoenix Suns playoff game with co-workers. I left around 7:30. Got there before tip-off. Stayed until close. You can check, he told them. And sure enough, when investigators subpoenaed the bar's surveillance system, there he was. High-definition video showed Daniel sitting at a table, a cold beer in his hand, cheering when the Suns made a clutch three-pointer. He laughed, clapped, even turned his head toward the camera in a way that was crystal clear. This wasn't the kind of blurry, ambiguous footage that defense lawyers usually fight over. This was clear enough to recognize his facial expressions, his mannerisms, even the faint scar near his left eyebrow. The time stamp sealed it, 9:47 p.m. When Emily pulled into her driveway, Daniel was on camera clinking glasses with a co-worker. At 10:15, roughly when detectives believed Emily was killed, the video showed him laughing at a joke, gesturing wildly at the game. His friends backed him up. 3 co-workers confirmed they'd been with him all night. And when detectives pressed harder, Daniel doubled down. "I love my wife," he said, his tone just shy of indignant. "Yes, we argued. Everyone argues. But I wasn't there. I couldn't have been there. You have video proof of that." For investigators, it was maddening. Every instinct told them Daniel was guilty. The crime scene screamed domestic violence. The lack of forced entry suggested she knew her killer. And Emily's sister revealed that she'd been consulting a divorce attorney, giving Daniel clear motive. But in court, motive isn't enough. Instinct isn't enough. You need evidence. And video evidence is considered one of the strongest forms of proof. Unless, of course, the video lies. Despite the seemingly airtight alibi, detectives didn't let go. The Phoenix Homicide Unit began piecing together Emily's last hours. They combed through her phone records, her emails, her calendar. One detail jumped out. Emily had a missed call from a divorce lawyer at 7:14 p.m. the night of her death. That suggested she was moving forward, and that Daniel might have known. Financial records revealed troubling patterns. Daniel had moved thousands of dollars into obscure online accounts, crypto wallets, private transfers, assets Emily had no knowledge of. It looked like he was preparing for something. Then came the forensic evidence. Investigators found faint traces of blood on the sink faucet in the upstairs bathroom. Blood that DNA later confirmed as Emily's. The problem? Daniel lived there too. He could argue he'd simply touched the faucet after discovering her body, but the timing didn't fit. When police arrived, he wasn't home. He returned only after officers were already processing the scene. Detectives grew convinced Daniel had somehow slipped away, committed the murder, and returned in time to cement his alibi. But the logistics were impossible. The drive from Riverside Sports Bar to the Carter residence was nearly 40 miles. Even at top speed, it would have taken at least 45 minutes each way. The timestamps left no gap for him to vanish, kill his wife, and reappear on camera. So, if not Daniel, who? The investigation expanded. Detectives chased other leads. Was Emily seeing someone else? No. Co-workers describe her as private, devoted, exhausted from nursing shifts. Was a robbery gone wrong? No, nothing was taken. A vengeful patient? A stalker? Every avenue hit a wall. And through it all, Daniel's alibi stood smug and immovable. He even began to project confidence, almost arrogance. He told friends, "They'll never pin this on me. They've got nothing." And he was right. On paper, they didn't. But then, small inconsistencies began to surface. The kind of details that investigators live for. It started with a bartender. Detectives re-interviewed Riverside Sports bar staff, asking them to describe Daniel's behavior that night. One bartender hesitated. "Yeah, he was here, but something about it was weird. He didn't order much, barely ate, just kind of sat there, like he was performing. Performing. The word stuck with detectives. When they re-examined the footage, that description made unsettling sense. On video, Daniel looked natural at first, laughing, chatting. But the more closely they studied it, the more mechanical it seemed. His hand gestures were repetitive. His laughs always came a fraction of a second late. And his interactions with people around him, the friends who confirmed his story, seemed oddly one-sided. He'd smile or nod, but the conversations rarely matched up. Investigators dug deeper into the security system itself. Riverside Sports Bar used a cloud-based video storage service. Detectives requested the raw data. That's when a chilling possibility emerged. The footage they had been analyzing wasn't an original recording. It was a copy uploaded, compressed, and resaved multiple times. When digital forensics experts ran analysis, they discovered anomalies, inconsistent pixel patterns, irregular framing, coding, and audio slightly out of sync with mouth movements. Signs of manipulation. At first, detectives couldn't believe it. The video was too clear, too precise. Deepfakes were something you saw online, in memes and manipulated celebrity clips. But this? A man forging his own presence on a security camera, essentially editing himself into the footage in real time? It seemed impossible, until they remembered Daniel's career. He wasn't just a software engineer. He specialized in artificial intelligence. He had published papers on machine learning. He knew the technology inside and out. The realization hit like a thunderclap. Daniel Carter may have manufactured his alibi using the very tools he built for his career. If true, it would mean this wasn't just a murder. It was one of the first documented cases of deepfake technology being weaponized to create the perfect crime. The discovery shook investigators to their core. If Daniel Carter had indeed forged his alibi, it meant they weren't just chasing a killer. They were chasing a man using cutting-edge technology to erase the very idea of truth. The Phoenix PD brought in the FBI's cyber division. Specialists in digital forensics pored over the Riverside Sports Bar footage frame by frame. At first glance, Daniel's presence looked seamless. The angle, the lighting, even the reflections on his beer glass appeared authentic. But deepfake detection tools revealed subtle irregularities invisible to the naked eye. One anomaly stood out. His eyes, in several frames. Daniel's pupils didn't react naturally to changes in light. The TV screen flickered during the game, but his eyes stayed frozen, unblinking. It was a tiny detail, less than a second long, but enough to raise red flags. Then came the audio. When investigators synced up background conversations with his visible reactions, the timing was off. A joke told by a co-worker produced laughter from Daniel 2 full seconds later. The FBI pushed further. They traced the bar's security server and discovered something shocking. The footage containing Daniel had been uploaded manually, not captured in real time. Someone with administrator access had overwritten the original files just days before Emily's murder. And the person who had the expertise to pull that off? Daniel Carter. Still, suspicion wasn't enough. They needed proof. Investigators raided Daniel's office and seized his computers. What they found was chilling. Entire folders labeled with machine learning models, facial scans, motion capture data, and buried deep in the directories, partial renders of the Riverside Sports Bar footage, test files, practice attempts, It was like stumbling across blueprints for a digital heist. For detectives, the picture was finally clear. Daniel hadn't just committed murder. He had staged a technological magic trick, betting that police would trust video evidence more than their own instincts. But Daniel had overlooked one thing, the human element. As the case against him grew, investigators turned their focus to why. Why would Daniel risk everything? On paper, he seemed to have it all. A successful career, a beautiful home, a wife admired for her compassion. But beneath the surface, cracks had been forming for years. Emily's friends revealed she had grown distant, often confiding about Daniel's controlling behavior. She wanted independence. She wanted freedom. And Daniel? He wanted control. The financial transfers now made sense. Daniel had been preparing for divorce, or rather, preparing to prevent one. If Emily left, his finances would be exposed. His image as a successful family man would shatter. To him, the solution wasn't compromise. It was elimination. Psychologists later described Daniel as a man consumed by narcissism. He couldn't stand the thought of losing. In his mind, Emily's decision to leave wasn't just betrayal. It was humiliation. And Daniel Carter wasn't a man who tolerated humiliation. The deepfake wasn't just about avoiding prison. It was about ego. It was about proving he was smarter than everyone else. The police, the courts, even the very system designed to hold people accountable. But arrogance is a dangerous companion. The same confidence that led Daniel to believe he could outsmart investigators ultimately led to his downfall. He left behind digital breadcrumbs, fragments of manipulated files, proof of tampering that no alibi could conceal. And when confronted with the evidence, Daniel's mask began to slip. Detectives describe him as alternating between cold attachment and explosive anger. One moment he insisted he was innocent. The next, he lashed out, accusing police of conspiracy. To the outside world, it looked like cracks in his carefully curated persona. But to investigators, it was validation. They were dealing with a man who thought he could outthink the truth itself. And soon, the courtroom would see him exposed. The trial of Daniel Carter drew national attention. Reporters called it the Perfect Alibi case. Tech experts debated the dangers of deepfakes on primetime news. For the first time, the public confronted a terrifying question. If video could be faked this convincingly, what did that mean for justice? Inside the courtroom, prosecutors painted a chilling picture. They presented the jury with side-by-side comparisons. The original Riverside footage, recovered from backup servers, and Daniel's manipulated version. The difference was damning. On the original tapes, Daniel was absent. His seat sat empty, a forgotten chair in the corner of the bar. The laughter, the gestures, the toasts, fabricated, every second of it. The jury watched as forensic analysts broke down the glitches frame by frame. The unnatural blinking, the lagging audio, the manipulated metadata. And then came the emotional blow. Emily's sister took the stand, describing the moment she learned of her sister's death. She spoke of Emily's dreams, her compassion, her quiet strength. She spoke of the future Emily had been building, a future stolen in an instant for the defense. There was little to cling to. They tried to argue that deepfake detection was unreliable, that the science was still new, but the overwhelming evidence, the test files on Daniel's computer, the overwritten servers, the financial motive, left no room for doubt. The prosecution closed with a simple, haunting line. Daniel Carter believed he could fake his way out of justice, but no deep fake can erase the truth. After just 6 hours of deliberation, the jury returned a unanimous verdict, guilty of first-degree murder. As the judge read the sentence, life without the possibility of parole, Daniel showed no emotion. He simply stared straight ahead, as if still convinced the world had failed to recognize his genius. But outside that courtroom, the world saw something else. A man who weaponized technology, and in doing so, revealed just how fragile the line between truth and deception had become. The trial ended. The cameras moved on, and Daniel Carter disappeared behind concrete walls and razor wire. But the echoes of his crime didn't fade. In fact, his case, the Perfect Alibi, became a turning point in how America thought about justice, technology, and trust. For Emily's family, the aftermath was bittersweet. Her sister said it best outside the courthouse. We got justice. But we also learned how fragile truth can be. Because this wasn't just about one marriage gone wrong or one man's monstrous ego. This was about the weaponization of technology in a way no one had truly anticipated. For decades, juries have been told, video doesn't lie. If you could see it, if you could hear it, you could trust it. But Daniel Carter shattered that belief. He showed that truth could be fabricated, that an alibi could be manufactured pixel by pixel. That reality itself could be rewritten with a few lines of code. And the implications were terrifying. If one man with a grudge could forge an alibi, what could organized crime do? What could corrupt officials do? What could foreign adversaries do? Lawmakers took notice. Within months of the verdict, congressional hearings were held on the dangers of deepfake technology. Experts testified that courts needed new standards for digital evidence. The FBI launched a task force dedicated to synthetic media detection. Universities poured funding into research on how to identify manipulated video. In Arizona, the state where Emily Carter lost her life, the legislature passed a groundbreaking bill requiring all surveillance footage submitted in court to undergo forensic authentication. Across the country, prosecutors began cautioning juries. Even video can lie, but beyond the legal reforms, there were deeper lessons. Emily's death reminded us of the human cost of unchecked technology. For all its promise, innovation without accountability can be weaponized in devastating ways. It reminded us, too, of the dangers of control, obsession, and narcissism, traits that, when left unchecked, can escalate from manipulation to violence. And it reminded us of something more personal. That trust, whether between spouses, between citizens and institutions, or between people and the evidence they rely on, is fragile. Once broken, it takes years to repair. For Emily's family, the loss can never truly be repaired. A sister, a daughter, a nurse devoted to helping others, gone. No legislation, no verdict, no societal reform can fill that void. But perhaps her story can serve as a warning that technology, no matter how advanced, can never replace human vigilance, that we must look closer, question deeper, and never assume that what we see is always the truth. As one FBI agent said in a press conference after the verdict, Emily Carter's case was not just about solving a murder. It was about protecting reality itself. And that may be the most chilling lesson of all, because in a world where the truth can be faked, the fight for justice becomes more important and more fragile than ever before. This was the Perfect Alibi, a story of love turned control, of technology turned to a weapon, and of justice tested in ways we never thought possible. And in the end, it asks us one haunting question. When the truth itself can be a lie, who will you believe?